So just to begin, my name is Jordan Ashwood. I'm the one who's been sending you emails, and I'm the partnerships manager at the Clinton Global Initiative University. And thank you so much for attending this information session today about the Verizon and CGI U 2021 Social Innovation Challenge. We're so excited that you've taken the time to be here today, and we hope this is helpful and gives you some additional information about the challenge, the application process, what to expect as far as timeline goes, and also to hear from some faculty from your own university as well, who have experience on one of our topic areas, which is health equity in the US. So to kick us off, for the first session, myself and my colleague Katie at Verizon, and then my colleagues Kara and Candle from our VentureWell partner, they will be speaking for this first overview session of the challenge. So I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves. Katie, do you want to go ahead?
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here with you. I'm Katie Davis. I am responsible for what we call social innovation at Verizon, which is basically looking at opportunities to align sort of business growth and our technology capabilities with social impact. So basically, how can we leverage the power of technology to drive social change or to solve for social challenges?
Wonderful, thanks. Candle, do you want to go?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Candle Hedrick, and I am a program officer at VentureWell. I work primarily with our US venture team and our global venture team doing entrepreneurship training and just working with entrepreneurship teams. So I'm excited to be a part of this program and help with anything that comes up.
And Kara?
Yep. Hi, everyone. Very excited to be with you this afternoon. I'm Kara Barnes. I'm a program officer with VentureWell. And as Kendall said, here at VentureWell, we work to support innovators and entrepreneurs who are developing science and technology-based innovations for good. So very excited to be talking with you today and learning together.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kara. All right. So to give us a quick overview of the partnership, I'm going to pass it off to Katie.
Thank you, Jordan. Yeah, so this is a new initiative for us at Verizon in partnership with CGI U and VentureWell. And really, we have a couple main objectives in this program. One is to use leading edge technology to help address big social challenges, as you'll see in the prompts that we're providing, but also to build a diverse community of student entrepreneurs and to really bring diverse and unique voices into the innovation ecosystem and to help support students in doing that. This initiative is part of what we call Citizen Verizon, which is our responsible business plan, basically saying, how do we as Verizon bring the resources of our company and the competencies of our company, as well as our technology products, to help advance economic, environment, and social issues. And so the Social Innovation Challenge itself is basically us at Verizon, CGI U and VentureWell challenging you as a group of students to develop social impact projects that leverage leading edge technology, which my colleague Josh will tell you a lot more about what that means in a few minutes, to advance in 3 priority issue areas with a focus on the US market. Immersive education technology, climate justice, and health equity. And I know we have a panel coming up later that's going to dive deeper into the health equity issue, but there are 3 very detailed prompts available on the challenge website that tell you a lot more and give you a lot of reading material about all 3 of these issues. So even though today's panel is really going to focus on health equity at the end of this meeting, you're very welcome to submit ideas in any of these realms. And there's a lot more guidance in the prompts to help you do that.
Thanks, Katie. And just to add to that as well, at the end of this meeting, I'll also send out just a packet of information, which includes links to the website where those prompts live, in addition to other, information and resources. So in terms of an overview of the application, so, this social innovation challenge, it's open and eligible to any current undergraduate or graduate student. And if you happen to be a CGIU alum, you're also eligible to apply. We are really encouraging students to apply in teams of 2 to 3, but students don't have to be from the same institution. So we actually have a Slack channel that is up and ready. And so if you would like to sort of meet other interested applicants and try to identify other team members, feel free to just email us at cgiu@clintonglobalinitiative.org, and we can add you to that Slack channel. So super exciting about that. In terms of the application itself, there are 2 sort of main components. There's a video submission, and this is really just a chance for us to get to know you and your teammates a little bit better, and to understand, what's really motivating you to take on the particular issue area that you've chosen and why you feel like your solution is going to be really impactful. And then there's a component where you have to enter all of your teammates' information and answer a few short answer questions that have to do with, really your understanding of the problem that you're trying to solve, how it's innovative, how it's different from other approaches that have been taken so far, the feasibility of the technology that you're proposing, the potential impact on the communities that you're looking to work with and impact, and also the scalability option. So can your idea continue to grow over time? So these are all things we're going to be looking for in your application, and so feel free to put any questions that you have into the chat, and we can definitely address them. But additionally, the week of March 8th, we will be having a series of virtual coaching sessions. So if you have questions as well, you can feel free to register for that event on the challenge website as well. So again, that's March 8th through 12th. And then the final application deadline is April 1st. So you have a good month and a half to be thinking about what you would like to do for your project, and to be, teaming up with folks that you want to work with. And then, we'd love to see your applications by that April 1st deadline. So in terms of opportunities, if you and your team are selected as finalists, so you will receive an exclusive spot in a summer program with our partner VentureWell. So the program that Kara and Candle are leading, and they are an accelerator partner, and they're going to do a whole presentation shortly to give you a sense of what that programming will look like. But each team will also receive approximately $20,000, including seed funding and a living stipend for each team member. In addition, you'll have access to mentorship with various experts in each of our communities, CGI U, Verizon, VentureWell, throughout the year. You'll have access to additional curriculum and resources through CGI U, and this will all culminate at the end of the summer in September with a pitch showcase where the finalist teams will each pitch their idea, and the top 3 teams from that pitch showcase will receive additional resources. So we're really excited about this opportunity and the various opportunities you'll be able to have through the summer programming if you're selected as a finalist team. So I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to pass it off to the VentureWell team to dive into their presentation and share with you a little bit about what that summer programming and that entrepreneurial training you'll receive will look like over the summer.
Thanks, Jordan. Great. Yeah, so go to next slide. So as I mentioned during my intro, VentureWell, we're on a mission to cultivate a pipeline of science and technology inventors, innovators, and entrepreneurs who are driven to solve some of the world's biggest challenges and ultimately create societal impact. So we do this through a multi-pronged approach of supporting both individuals, ventures, teams, and the ecosystem that supports them. So if you want to advance again and again, thanks. So our flagship program is the Entrepreneurial or E-Team grant program that is a combined funding program and training program to help student-based innovators launch and grow their innovations and the ventures that are supporting them. And so we do this through a tiered, staged approach, but ultimately the goal is to help teams find the right pathway to help them get their product into the market to have the impact that they are hoping to create. So we do this by helping teams explore the commercial potential, the right pathways to get their innovation to market, by using evidence-based models to help them fail fast and develop the right business model, to find the right partners and investors to help them grow and scale as they're moving forward. And really what's unique about VentureWell as an accelerator kind of program is that we are focused solely on science and technology-based startups that have the potential for social and environmental impact. So this partnership with the Clinton Foundation and Verizon is very exciting for us because it's an overlap of all of the aspects that we care about. So as I mentioned, the E-Team program is a staged tiered approach. So in this program, the first stage is a $5,000 grant and a 1-week training called Pioneer that help innovators discover the right market for their invention or their innovation. Following that workshop, the stage 2 program is a $20,000 grant and another 1-week workshop called Propel that helps you validate your business model. So doing customer discovery and starting to talk to users and customers who will be ultimately buying and utilizing and benefiting from your technology. And then the final stage is the Aspire program, which has the opportunity for matching investment. So in this stage of the program, we are not giving you a grant, but if you are raising a round of sophisticated investment, VentureWell has the opportunity to invest as well. So for the Social Innovation Challenge, next slide. It's the opportunity, if you're selected, to participate in the first stage of this program. So the dates shown here are tentative, but the idea is that the program lasts the entire summer. So at the beginning of the summer, the first several weeks of June, the program onboarding, you'd participate in a webinar, intro calls with myself or Candle or other VentureWell staff, just so that we can get to know you, you can get to know us. There's some preparatory work assignments and intake surveys so that everybody's kind of level set for phase 2, which is a 4-day virtual workshop, tentatively for the 3rd week of June, but dates to be finalized. But really, this is a 4-day intensive virtual workshop where you will work through different market applications for your innovation to help you really hone in on what that right product market fit is to get your technology into the market and having that impact. And we do these workshops through a variety of different formats. So there are a few lectures, but it's very heavy on breakout groups and individual teamwork and having you learn from each other and providing feedback to your peers as well. And then the bulk of the program really is after that 4-day workshop, which we're calling this coaching phase, which is intended to last the remainder of the summer and get you ready for that culminating pitch showcase. And it will consist of a variety of different formats. So one-on-one calls with VentureWell staff for mentoring and coaching, office hours with expert mentors from Verizon and the Clinton Foundation and our networks, and then webinars and learning sessions. And really those different components are set up to help you further advance your technology, do customer discovery so that you're talking to users and customers of your technology to help you really hone in and build that evidence-based model for getting that technology into the market and having impact. So I will pause there to see if there are any questions. All right, and then in the interest of time, Jordan, I'll turn it back to you. You're on mute.
Thank you. Any questions so far as a whole in terms of what we chatted about so far? Anything about that? Yeah, go ahead.
I just had a question about the teams. Are there any exceptions to the number of people? Because, for example, I've been working on an innovative project, but it's been with faculty members. So I'm the only student. And over the summer, I know that those faculty members probably couldn't commit to a summer-long program. So are there any exceptions in situations like this?
So that's a great question. Thank you. So in this situation, the process is really, and the challenge is open to students, undergraduate or graduate, or CGIU alumni. So, in this particular situation, I think you would need to find another student that you would want to work with, whether that's students on your campus, or we connect you with a student who's at a different institution who's also working on a similar idea. But they would need to be either a student or an alumni.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions so far? Okay, wonderful. Well, we're a little ahead of schedule, but that is fine. Josh, he is my wonderful colleague from Verizon, and he is going to be leading us through a session on social impact and leading edge technology. And he's going to explain what we sort of mean by leading edge technology, and how that impacts the social innovation challenge and what you can expect from it. So Josh, I'm going to pass it over to you, and you should be able to share your screen.
What is going on? There is nothing happening in the chat. Can somebody please post in the chat and let me know that we're not just presenting to ourselves here? Literally anybody. Oh, here we go. Got a couple. Christopher Doss is here, like a boss. All right. How's everybody doing? We are going to talk a little bit about 5G leading edge technologies and what that means for you. Hey, Angela, how are you? This is interactive. Please do feel free to pop here into the chat. I'm going to be asking some questions. I'm not necessarily saying that if you get the questions right, that it's going to be a knock in your favor when it comes time to assessing the submissions, but I'm not saying it's not. We just don't know. So might as well just be interactive, and if you know the answer to a question, then go ahead and say so. We're going to give this a shot here. I'm going to share this real quick. I don't have any sound to share, so that'll be all right. Can everybody see that? Yeah, nothing blocked or anything. Okay.
We're all set.
All set. Wonderful. Really excited to be here. So I'm with Verizon 5G Labs. My job, and I don't know if you knew that this is a job that you could apply for. My job is to predict the future. We know that 5G is going to bring with it a lot of it's going to enhance a lot of existing technologies. It's going to wake up a lot of latent technologies, and it's going to create a lot of new technologies and values for people, for industries, for humanity and society. Really, we know that that we have a responsibility to make sure that we point that technology in the right direction. And so that's a big reason why we're here today. We want to make sure that as technology continues to advance, that we make sure that we bring along the industries with it that can actually do some good with it in the world. And so I'm real excited to be here today. When we're talking about 5G, and the types of technologies that it's going to enable. First of all, people have heard of 5G, like in the chat, right? Let me know if you've heard of 5G. Does it say 5G on your phone right now? Do you notice any differences in the performance or things like that? Like, or have you heard anything about 5G? Denise says yes. Good. So a big thing that Verizon is into, of course, is 5G. Angela says no, she doesn't have it on her phone, but she has heard of it. That's good. That's good. You're going to know a lot more about it after this today. So Verizon is making a lot of really big bets on 5G, but we know that 5G is not the only technology game in town. But by and large, we are a connectivity company. We connect people, we connect devices. We try to make sure that that connectivity is there for people to make good decisions and for people to create new technologies that push things forward. Most technologies that you can think of right now are connected technologies, right? They have some realm of connectivity to them. When you're talking to your smart speaker, when you are using the remote control for your television, These things are connected. When you're on your laptop, it's connected via Wi-Fi. So like connectivity really is, it's underpinning almost everything that we do, right? And we know that 5G is going to be the next evolution of that. And a lot of people say, well, you know, I mostly use Wi-Fi when I'm at home. And I gotta answer for you on that one too. I think 5G is going to end up taking over that game also. So we know that 5G really started with what we have now, which is 4G, right? And to understand how 5G is going to lead to the expansion of leading edge technologies and is going to give you a lot of new technologies and platforms to work with when you get out there into the world and begin creating these things, it's helpful to understand where we came from. Does anyone know who this person is on the screen right here? He had a knack for wearing black turtlenecks, and he would get up on stage and he would say fun phrases like "one more thing," right? And that's kind of what he was saying right here in this particular picture. Yeah, Angela got it, Steve Jobs. Yeah, Condell, you got it, Steve Jobs. He was saying one more thing, and what he's holding there is a first generation iPhone, something that no one had ever seen before. And when he held it up in front of the stage in Cupertino, California, he said, "It's an iPod that you can make phone calls with," right? And everyone was like, whoa, that's amazing. They lost their minds because they'd never really seen anything like that before. Because up until that point, everything, remember Blackberries, they had like the touch pads and you could type with them. I held off on getting a smartphone for a long time because I really missed those keys that you could touch, right? And but it could do some really interesting things that no other device could do before that. It could download and manipulate large files from the internet, and it had a full web browser. And up until this point in 2007, no device had been able to do that. Not Blackberries, not Palms, none of those things. Those were mostly glorified email and calendaring devices that had very limited functionality when it came to connectivity. And we were okay with that. And you know why? Because we didn't know any better. Because we didn't really know that we could do all of the amazing things that you can do on a device right now. As far as we were concerned, being able to sync wirelessly between email and calendar invites, that was next generation, man. That was crazy. And so here now we have this guy sitting here with this device with a screen that can change and a number pad that can disappear and reappear and then disappear again, which I thought was witchcraft. And all of a sudden everything just works, right? But it had some limitations to it. And one big piece of those limitations was the network that it was living on, because up until that point, we were still on 3G. This was 2007. Now, with the initial technology, like 1G was like phone calls with a Zach Morris phone, right? That brick phone. Anybody know why it's called a Zach Morris phone? I mean, I don't know if anybody calls it a Zach Morris phone. I call it a Zach Morris phone. If you know why it's called a Zach Morris phone, throw it up there in the chat. Let me know. It was phone calls, right? And then came, yeah, Kara got it, Saved by the Bell. It was a phone you could make phone calls with. Then came texting, right? After that, with 3G, was the ability for the beginnings of data, right? You could text, but you could also like send a grainy picture of yours. You could send a selfie to your boo. Like that's pretty much all you could do. There was really not much you could do except for emails and calendar. And so this device comes on the scene, and it looks like it can do a whole lot. But after 3 years of the iPhone being on the market, this was the most innovative app that we had on our phones. Does anyone know what this app was back in the day? I think it's still around. I don't really play it anymore. This is Words with Friends, right? And so after the developer store was over, or the app store was open, the developer community rallied around the iPhone. They were creating applications that lived on the iPhone that used the connectivity mediums that they had available at the time, and that was 3G. And so they made Scrabble that could be played by somebody who was in Tennessee or somebody who lived in Turkey, right? You could play Scrabble with people from all over the world, and you could do it synchronously, and that was a big deal, right? But we all know that our phones can do a lot more now, because then 4G was released in 2010, and people thought, well, 4G is going to bring with it things like streaming video. And they weren't wrong. 4G brought with it streaming video, but it also brought with it this whole host of new types of technologies that we use today, right? And we all know that if you leave the house and you don't have your wallet, you're kind of okay. You're going to sit and think about, do I need to go back to the house and get my wallet? And the answer is probably going to be no, right? But if you leave your phone, man, it don't matter where you are turning back around. You're going to go home and get that phone because you need to be connected, because there's all those applications and services that live on that device that help us live our day to day, up to even including being a replacement for our wallet in many situations, right? And so 4G really brought with it these new types of technologies that we hadn't really ever considered before. Things like seamless e-commerce and the rise of Amazon. Things like video and visual connectivity, and brought with it things like Facebook, streaming video with things like Netflix, right? All of these different technologies that rely on 4G and this equilibrium of connectivity and hardware that we got with the iPhone or the modern smartphone and 4G. And that now we have what you see here, which is nothing what the landscape looked like only 10 years ago. You have one person she's on a tablet there on the left, she's watching a video. This guy in the middle, he's playing music. She's talking to like 5 people at once while checking the weather and checking directions, right? This was not possible 10 years ago. And a lot of people don't realize how far we've come and what impact connectivity has had on the rise of technology. This is a slide that was meant to be shown 4 slides ago. So there's the Zach Morris phone there on the left, Kara. That's our Saved by the Bell phone. That was a lot of us. That was our introduction to cell phones. We'd never even heard of a cell phone until we saw Zach Morris calling his dad on the phone when he was sitting on the bed right next to him. That's a throwback to that episode if anybody remembers that. But so there's your evolution of wireless technology, all the way from that brick through to the modern smartphone. And so now we have 5G is on the market, right? 5G is here. It comes in different variations, and I'm going to go over that in just a second, and then we can have a deeper conversation about the types of technology that that's going to enable. So a lot of people say, is 5G is just faster internet? Well, it is faster internet, but it brings with it a lot more than we really think about. And the way that we think about it, it tends to be a simple way, just like this right here, right? The example of the time it takes to download a 2-hour film. With 5G, it's super fast. But the issue that I have with this particular example is that I can't remember the last time I downloaded a movie to my phone. If you've downloaded a movie to your phone recently, go ahead and put it in the chat and let me know why you were doing that. Usually it's somebody who says, oh, I was about to get on a plane. Well, what you're telling me is you were downloading an asset because you were about to have no expectation of reliable connectivity whatsoever. Awesome. Most people don't do that. We're a streaming society now. Things are streaming. This video is streaming. God, we've been streaming everything for the past 11 months, right? And so we've gotten real good at streaming. And so there's not really a need to download a movie to a phone anymore. And so, but the reason we do this is because a lot of people on this call, and throw it up in the chat if you do, we remember Napster, right? We remember LimeWire. We remember how frustrating and maddening it was to try to download a song or an album or, God forbid, a movie, have it take forever, and then end up being not the thing that we wanted in the first place. Maybe it was grainy, the quality wasn't good, or maybe it was even in a different language, and we had to start all over again, right? And so but that's something that we can all understand. That's something that we can have as a frame of reference. We know what that frustration felt like, and now we're saying with 5G, we've eliminated that frustration, right? And so what we know, though, is that 5G and these types of technologies that it's going to empower are really bringing us into this thing we're calling the 4th industrial revolution, right? And this isn't something that Verizon just made up. Like, this is talked about in Davos. If you know what happens in Davos, go ahead and throw that in the chat too. When all the world leaders get together to talk about where the global economy is going to be going in the future, they're talking about the 4th industrial revolution, because it's this cyber physical era, this marriage of people and technology that is going to drive economies forward as we move into the future, much more so than we've seen before. And we know that it's going to happen because it's happened before. We have 3 previous examples with it right here, all the way from the ability to very quickly produce cloth, running through the ability to create objects, complex objects on a conveyor belt, and then the beginnings of a computer that could count higher and faster than we could, right? And so we're here on this precipice of something brand new that's going to be happening again. And so here's a great example of the types of technologies that advanced connectivity can and will enable. There's 8 or so different ways that we know that 5G is going to be superior to the types of connectivity that we have now. And this is a slide that kind of outlines some of those things. And I'll make these slides available to folks here after the presentation. But taking a look at this slide, we can see that advanced connectivity is going to impact everything from gaming to autonomous vehicles to real-time face recognition and language translation. Imagine on the fly having something being able to recognize who you are and be able to offer you personalized services, or being able to understand and have direct translations when you are in a different country just based on an earpiece that you have in your ear that's connected to the network, right? That technology, it's possible, and it's going to become much more ubiquitous. Now, I talked about how 5G is going to potentially upend things like Wi-Fi, and this is a really good example of it because 5G comes in a couple of different flavors. Wireless connectivity, like 5G, is going to be taking over what we traditionally think of as a wired connection, as that cable connection that goes into homes and businesses. And so one particular flavor of 5G is called fixed wireless access. And as you're thinking about your projects, as you're thinking about your submissions and your ideas about how advanced technology can begin to solve some of the world's most pressing problems, I want you to be thinking about how the evolution of connectivity is going to grow. And so the first of which is the one that people don't really think about that often, and that is that 5G can be used not just to send a data stream to your device, your phone, but it can be used to send a data stream into a building, into a home or a business or something like that. And so we can say that that homes and businesses that have otherwise been limited by the type of cable connection they have running into that business or home, we can then supplant that by just beaming high-speed internet into the windows, right? Let me say that again. We can beam high-speed internet into the windows of homes and businesses, and we can create multi-gigabit connections where otherwise the hardware assets that that building or home might have would prevent it from doing so. And so what does that look like in practicality? I'm sure a lot of folks have been in this situation or a situation like this where there are this many people in the home all trying to do all of these things, and none of them were functioning very well because everyone's trying to use the internet at the same time. 5G solves that problem. And especially when for buildings and structures and new businesses that don't necessarily have super high-speed cable connectivity, we're able to solve that problem by beaming it into the home and offering up solutions like this. Now, this is obviously something where everyone's sitting at home. They look like they're all happy. They're all consuming content. Everyone's fine. But start thinking about what sort of physical structures might need connectivity in the future in the areas of the 3 prompts that this challenge is based on, and what sort of solutions you might deliver into a physical structure if you had the ability to do so, right? And so the next is what we call 5G mobile, right? And that is that we can send 5G to devices just the same way as you have with your 4G phones right now. Now, you might think to yourself, well, what difference is that going to make? If I have 5G, if I have 4G, I have the apps on my phone, they're going to function the same way, right? Well, maybe. Probably not, because we just already talked about an example of 10 years ago. The apps that you had on your phone were essentially apps that made fart noises and words with friends and Scrabble, right? That's what you had on your phone 10 years ago. And when 4G came out, we thought, wow, I guess my Scrabble's going to be faster. No one said that. They were like, what's next? What is coming next? And people delivered. Those innovators like Mark Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs and Reed Hastings and Jeff Bezos, right? They created new technologies, they created new ways of life that lived on 4G as a connectivity platform and gave us the new things that we had that we didn't have 10 years ago. Well, 5G is going to do the same thing, right? On the devices itself, it's going to start enabling new types of content, new types of experiences. On the left, there is a full-size volumetric avatar of the greatest basketball player to ever live. I'll fight you, Michael Jordan, right? And being able to have him appear in your living room and being able to start having, and right now he's static, but what if he moved around, right? What if he actually reacted to you? We have these portals in digital world that you see there in the middle, that you can go through a portal, almost like Doctor Strange, and then be in an entirely new extended reality experience. Is it virtual reality? Is it augmented reality? It's this mix. We call it XR, right? And then on the right there, you have even more complex avatars that move and are dynamic with you even more so than they are right now. And a lot of these, they're kind of like fun and games examples, but start thinking about the types of experiences and value that can be pushed to users that have these kinds of devices. And it doesn't stop there. You can go fully immersive and create new stories. And this is the Stonewall Inn riots. And this is something that Verizon created with some partnerships that took people there. And what you're not getting from this particular slide is the spatial audio that comes with it. The fact that you can be hearing what it was like based on recordings that were made during those times in New York City. So where I'm located, actually. And even more so than that, we start thinking about recreating events in movement, almost at scale, showing what it was like for this lander to land on the moon. And this is something that one of our subsidiary companies, Yahoo, made in partnership with Time. That you could open it up and you could have this scale model of the lunar lander landing on the surface of the moon. And if anybody watched the recent rover landing on Mars, you know how cool that was. And it doesn't stop there, because my personal view, and this is not necessarily a position that the company holds, Verizon holds, this is Josh's idea, is that phones aren't necessarily going to be here with us forever. Phones are going to slowly and eventually rapidly be replaced by an ecosystem of connected devices, right? You already have watches that you wear. I'm sure some of you are already wearing a smart watch. Some of you are listening to this via wireless earbuds. Now, right now, these wireless earbuds and your watch are probably connected into a hub device. Your watch is probably connected to your phone, and your earbuds are probably connected to your computer or however else you're watching this. Eventually, you're going to start having other types of peripheral devices, things like eyewear that you're seeing here in this funny animated GIF. You're going to start having connected clothing, and these things are eventually going to connect not to these hub devices like your phone or your computer, but they're going to connect into the network itself. And so you're going to be able to turn these things on and off, and they're going to immediately connect just the same way your phone does, and provide seamless experiences that are almost this distributed sensory experiences, just like this individual right here who's walking in a field. And all of a sudden she realizes, oh snap, the Champions League football is happening right now and Bayern is hopefully winning. I'm going to put on my glasses and boom, I'm going to be transported right there on the field, because there are special 360 cameras that are there. You've all seen football games and the cameras that move around. I'm all of a sudden tapped into the network of those, and I can feel like I'm right there in the middle of the action because just of this eye set that I'm putting on that's connected into the network, using advanced connectivity mediums like 5G to deliver this kind of new experience, right? And that has nothing to do with the phone. And so that's where we're going with consumers, and you're going to start seeing that more and more. And so, but it doesn't just stop there with consumers. We know that it's going to impact industry. It's going to impact industries like retail and robotics and healthcare and education. And that's where a lot of what you're going to be thinking about as you start thinking about these prompts. And we know it's going to be happening where people are, in places like grocery stores, in places like hospitals and doctors' offices, right? In places like even their homes, right? And so the question is, how is connectivity going to drive new technologies and new value in back-end industries that can then impact users, right? And so on the left there, we have some of those consumer-facing applications that we've already talked about, things like gaming, things like content, things like video. And on the right there, we know that it's going to wake up new types of technologies like edge computing, which is basically taking the cloud, which is really far away in a lot of cases, and bringing it really, really close so that the transition for data to move back and forth is extremely snappy. And we know it's going to create this new IoT. Anybody know what IoT stands for? It's going to create IoT and connected ecosystems that are able to drive new types of value for users. And so this is just an example. I know that probably your submissions aren't necessarily going to focus on factory operations, but it gives you a really good idea of how 5G is going to impact all of these things at the same time, whether it's the ability for drones to be able to collect high volumes of data and then be able to relay that information back to people or back to robots or back to what we call autonomous guided vehicles. That third animation there, that little forklift. The idea is it's fully autonomous, and it's moving things around, and it's being guided by a user in VR who may or may not even be in that warehouse, right? And so the idea that 5G is going to allow for all of these things to be happening at scale. And when we say at scale, thank you, Enoch, Internet of Things, and Condell too, I appreciate that. The idea that that is going to be able to impact these things at scale. When we say at scale, we really mean like that third image in there of the one truck, which all of a sudden is many trucks. And the idea that we can take these benefits that 5G and advanced connectivity is bringing, and it's not just doing it to one robot or one assembly line, it can do it through an entire factory or an entire ecosystem, right? Or an entire community. Because what happens when a community is connected so that traffic is optimal, so that pedestrian movements are optimal, so that hospitals can function optimally, so that emergency responders can know the best way to get somewhere, and they already have a drone on the scene who's feeding them back live imagery so that they can make the best decisions about what types of assets and resources to deploy. What I just described sounds like it should be possible, and right now it's kind of not. We're getting there. Right now, usually all a drone can do is just record information, bring it back to a hub where someone has to go pull that chip or that hard drive out and then process that video, right? And so 5G will make it so all of these things can run streaming in real time autonomously, and then they can happen at scale. And so what are we doing now? Like what is actually happening, and how are we driving towards this future? And the answer is you're part of it. This is the 5G labs, like I talked about before, and we have them located all over the U.S. and even in some cases internationally. And we work with academic institutions and non-government organizations and NGOs, right? We also work with startups and large enterprises to find out how we can work with customers, what their needs are, and then we build out what we call use case trials, which is basically an experiment. We say we think 5G combined with these types of technologies can have this sort of an impact. That's our hypothesis. Then we go test it. We work with organizations just like you who come up with those same types of hypotheses. You're going to come up with a hypothesis that says these types of technologies combined with this type of connectivity can provide this kind of value for this kind of a population. And then you're going to build an experiment and test it. And that's what everyone is here to work for, Verizon, Clinton Global Initiative, and VentureWell. We're here to work with you to develop these hypotheses and build those experiments and test those concepts. And we've done this before. We have lots of experience. We've done it around first responder technology. We've done it around robotics and education technology and gaming. And what you see in there on the right, the built on 5G challenge that we did, that gave us brand new ways that 5G can be applied to artificial intelligence and enterprise grade augmented reality and digital twin virtual reality experiences. If you don't know what digital twin is, I highly recommend looking it up in the context of VR because it's pretty freaking cool. And so we've done this before, and we're pretty good at figuring out ways to inspire other people to work with us to predict the future, right? And we really love doing it, and it really is our bread and butter because we don't wait for the future. We work with our partners just like you to build it. I'm going to leave you with something here. Do you know who this is? He looks kind of goofy, right? Up until recently, this was the richest person in the world. This is Jeff Bezos. This is the founder of Amazon. In this photo, he's holding pretty much all the things that were sold on Amazon. You know this because he has hair, and it was a long time ago. He has just launched Amazon as a bookseller online, and he has just started selling things other than books, right? And he looks super happy. He realizes that he's stumbled onto something that has a market. It's a long time ago, and he basically has no idea that he is going to reinvent the way we think about everything, from commerce to partnerships to cloud. Cloud hosting wasn't even a thing back then, right? He had no idea that he was going to found a company that was going to take us to space. He had no idea that he was going to be on the leading edge of technology and that he was going to be responsible for helping to set policy, right? But there he is. He's just hanging out there with a big old smile on his face because he has no idea that 4G and access for his customers to his service is about to reinvent everything. And that's where we are right now. And that's where you are right now. Because we look at this picture and we go back and we say, wouldn't it be great if somebody could just tell him, wouldn't it be great if we could do that again, where we were on this precipice, we were on this cliff, about to go over into this whole new realm of technology, and we could make the world into anything that we wanted it to be, just like Zuckerberg and Bezos and Steve Jobs and all those people did? Wouldn't that be cool? The answer is, it would be cool. We're also there right now. We're here again. And those folks had their day in the sun, because the world is about to usher in an entirely new age of developer, an entirely new age of entrepreneur, an entirely new age of people just like you who are thinking about technology in new ways, in critical ways, in ways that are going to transform the lives, not only of people who need to order, I don't know, shoes online and have them here tomorrow, but transform the lives of the people who need it the most, who are going to use these technologies to bring value and prosperity to people who otherwise might have struggled to get it. And that's what we're relying on you here for. That's why we want your input. We want your ideas. We want to help you build the new thing so that you can be part of this new age of creator, part of this new age of developer. When I say that, I don't necessarily mean coding. I mean actually developing new things, because you're the ones who are thinking really, really creatively about what the world needs right now, because you see it, because you're living it. And so we are here as a resource for you, and we want to hear these ideas that you have because we want to help you go and build them. That's all I got.
Thank you so much, Josh. Does anyone have any questions for Josh?
I have a quick question.
Go for it.
My question is, I heard you mention about drones. So do you have any projects or anything that you guys are working on right now with drones? Because I do currently teach drone education, and it's very, very like uncommon right now.
Yeah, so we have worked with drones in a couple of capacities on the experimental side with our 5G robotics challenge that we did. We've done some experimental work with drones. We're working with drones as far as first responder technology goes, and how do we make sure that that drones are being used for disaster recovery and assessment. And I'm sure there's a few other ways that we're working with them. Now, as far as like publicly facing things, not so much. A lot of these are going to be on our B2B side, where we work with municipalities, we work with governments and things like that. But we have been working and actually proving out use cases of cellular connected drones and the ability for them to go and be piloted, be autonomous, and also then to stream back that kind of information. So yeah, I'll put my email address in the chat here. I'm not I'm just put it here for anybody who wants it. Send me a note and I'll we can talk more about it.
Wonderful. Any other questions for Josh? I see a question that came in through the chat and I can address that, but are there any other questions for Josh?
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Looking forward to working with you.
Thank you, Josh. I also just learned a ton about leading edge technology that I didn't know before myself. So thank you, Josh. I feel pretty inspired. So there's a question that came in about how students are able to get involved in this challenge and how teams are created, because this person arrived a bit belatedly. So just a quick piece on that. So teams are for 2 to 3 people, and we have a Slack channel where you can meet other interested applicants from across the country, across the world. And so just feel free to email us. I will make sure that you have my email address available, and just email us your name and your email address and we can set you up on that Slack channel to find a teammate. And also we have our challenge website that I can direct you to that has a lot of information about the best ways to get involved and how to apply as well. So I hope that helps clear that up. Wonderful. Okay, any other questions before we head into our next part of the session?
I just had a question about patents. As a part of your mentorship over the summer, do you cover how to obtain a patent and kind of guide students through that process if they have an innovation that they want to seek patency for?
That's a great question. And I defer to the VentureWell team as they are sort of our summer program partners. Any thoughts from Kara or Candle?
Yeah, absolutely. IP, intellectual property, is definitely one of the core components of the curriculum that we teach. So that will definitely be something covered during the programming.
Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kara. Any other questions before we jump into our panel with 2 of your amazing professors on campus? Okay, wonderful. Well, so we have Dr. Christopher Doss here and Dr. Tammy Webb. If you could, both turn on your videos, that would be great. And we are so excited to have you both here. So the next and final part of this session is a conversation with Dr. Webb and Dr. Doss about health equity in particular. So health equity is one of the 3 themes that you can submit a project on for the Verizon and CGI U Social Innovation Challenge. So the other 2 are climate justice and immersive education technology. But we're going to be focusing on health equity for this particular conversation, as there are a lot of resources on your campus for this particular theme and area of study. So we're going to have a wonderful quick conversation with our 2 professors here, and they can share sort of their experience and their expertise on what health equity is, and what are the social barriers to healthcare that are really pressing in the United States right now, and how ultimately technology can play a role. And so, like Josh said in his presentation, what we're really trying to get students and alums to think about is how can we connect leading edge technology like Josh described to major social issues like healthcare, like education, like climate justice. So the focus of this panel will be to really do a deep dive into health equity and how technology can play a role. So I encourage you to be thinking about connections between those 2. And of course, if you have questions as we go through, please put them into the chat and we will either address them at the time or at the end as well. And I just see a couple questions have come in. So one question that came in is about you have to develop a team before you can apply. So you do need to have a team when you apply. And so you can either connect with a person on your campus, but also if you would like to be connected to other interested applicants, we are helping facilitate that. So just send me an email and I will make sure you have my email, but just send me an email and we will get you connected on our Slack channel to meet other participants. Perfect. All right. So to jump into the panel, I want to give Dr. Doss and Dr. Webb time to introduce themselves first. So Dr. Webb, why don't you go ahead first?
Oh, hello, everyone. I don't know if I'll be able to outdo our last presenter, but I'm going to try. I'm Tammy Webb. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Counseling in the College of Education on the campus of North Carolina A&T State University. I teach multicultural counseling as well as counseling women and girls, and my focus is on providing counseling services to racial and ethnic minorities. And then I also focus on mental health issues. I'm a clinical mental health specialist. So my area of interest is looking at clienteles and populations who are marginalized and who have a lack of resources or identify with a lack of resources and how it affects them mentally, physically, as well as spiritually. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Webb. Wonderful to have you. Dr. Doss, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christopher Doss. I'm associate professor in the electrical and computer engineering department here at North Carolina A&T State University. My work in the Internet of Things as well as mobile health is basically encompassing how to extend the reach of the doctor beyond the four walls of the hospital and what have you. So I've been involved with HL7, which is a health information organization that caters around making sure there's interoperability between the various health systems that you may encounter, whatnot. I also have been involved with a few projects using mobile applications for helping people with suffering from Alzheimer's or working with the caregivers, whatnot, and as well as working on a COVID app for helping students to identify resources and what have you. Thank you for having me as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Das. Excited to have you with us as well. And so to jump into this conversation, health equity is a big term. And so if you have thoughts on sort of what comes to mind for you when I say health equity, please feel free to put them into the chat. I would love to hear what comes to mind when I say health equity. But when in the context of what we're talking about today, health equity are really systemic differences in the health status of different population groups. And so oftentimes one's gender, one's ethnicity, one's race, one's employment status, one's geographic location, all of these pieces can contribute to whether or not one has access to equitable healthcare. And so really health equity looks at, what are those social barriers to healthcare and how can we best address them? And so in terms of the specific prompts that we're going to be asking you to respond to is really about how can we leverage leading edge technology to address any health inequities that currently exist within the US. So how can we use 5G? How can we use big data? How can we use, XR, artificial intelligence, to really address some of these key health inequities? So I'm going to start by turning a question to Dr. Webb. And Dr. Webb, if you could just sort of give us an overview on what are the most pressing social barriers to equitable healthcare and why certain communities are impacted more than others.
That's a really good question. I think first we need to look at the social barriers and identify what social barriers are. And the social barriers, it's a lack of community support, social norms or social groups where they don't have the support. Cultural barriers can also fall in that category. When we talk about cultural barriers, we're looking at traditions, cultural customs, religion, things that may not be consistent with the majority culture, but are very tied into ethnic minority cultures. There are economic barriers, and economic barriers are tied into the lack of rights. It's tied into economics, lack of affordable housing, jobs that don't offer healthcare benefits or insurance. And then we have political barriers in terms of how politics plays a role in access to clean water, living in cities with high pollution that are typically focused in your minority populations or your minority communities. And a large one is when we look at educational barriers as well. All of those social barriers tie into healthcare because all of them tie into the lack of appropriate healthcare for individuals who are, I would identify as Black, brown, or individuals with disabilities or individuals from other marginalized groups. And by them having a lack of healthcare, not only does it affect their physical health, it affects their mental health. And then it becomes a circle that spirals around and around, and there's no way, it's almost like a treadmill that keeps running and keeps running, and no matter what, you don't have an exit to get off the treadmill. And that's how the healthcare system is, and a disparity within the healthcare system. Did I answer that question correctly?
Oh, no, absolutely no. And definitely your area of expertise. And so, why would you say that, like, as I know you mentioned that, this really impacts particularly Black, brown communities and other marginalized communities, those with disabilities, why do you think that these social barriers impact those groups in particular?
It impacts those groups in particular because we could look at it from multiple factors. It impacts some minorities because it's the lack of access to the treatment. So for example, if you think about the minority groups in the areas or the incomes that they live in, the food deserts, areas that they don't have access to medical treatment. So if you have an individual who goes to Dollar General and buys groceries that are in the frozen food sections or chips or sodas because they don't have a fresh marketplace or access to a store where they can get fresh foods and vegetables, you're going to see populations with hypertension, diabetes, obesity, increased cardiovascular diseases, and those diseases are disproportionately associated to African Americans or Blacks, as well as Hispanics. So when we start to look at these areas, then we start to see other health barriers associated to allergies, asthma, and all those tie into health disparities that can be controllable. However, there's a lack of education. The second area that I will look at in terms of um, doctors in the medical field who provide services, we have less than 3% of the population, or medical population, less than 3% have medical degrees. So individuals may be misdiagnosed or not diagnosed at all. There may be some cultural mistrust with medical professionals, or the same test that may be run on a white patient, that test may not be run on a Black or brown person, or because of the lack of access to health insurance, quality health insurance, the ethnic minorities don't, or they can't afford to go to a doctor to find out about hypertension. And if they can, and if they do, then can they afford the medication to treat it? So it goes back to that treadmill. I'm running fast and I'm running hard, but I can't get off of this treadmill.
And I think what you said about cultural mistrust is really important. Can you expand upon that? What you mean by cultural mistrust?
Yes, the history of, if we go back to the Tuskegee experiment, and people think, well, why do we go back then? But if you all were aware, maybe about 20 years ago, Johns Hopkins, there was a report with Johns Hopkins studying blood work of Black low-income individuals in a community without permission. So that created another area of mistrust. Oftentimes, if a doctor doesn't look like the client that they're serving, then there's some mistrust based on history and how history repeats itself. And one of the problems with mistrust within the Black community is that may be also contributing to medications may not be effective for Blacks because Blacks were not a part of the sample size, because there is a mistrust within the medical profession where minorities don't trust the recommendations or the advice of doctors. Then also, if you just think recently with the COVID vaccination, there was a study done recently, and I can't think of who did it, but they looked at the state of Florida and all of the counties that were red counties, Republican counties. They had a high percentage of individuals who already had the first COVID vaccination. But then in your blue counties, your Democrat, your highly ethnic minority communities, they didn't have access. They didn't even get some of the COVID vaccinations in those communities. So then there's a mistrust as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the connection to COVID is definitely a real thing, and something that I've noticed within my own Black family as well, that there is this just mistrust, and there's a historical legacy that stems from it. So I definitely agree. And I know that you said you're a multicultural mental health specialist as well. And so, how would you describe the scope of mental health inequities within some of these underserved communities? What does that look like?
Well, interesting enough, if we tie in the medical health and the mental health, and we're seeing the increase in depression, anxiety, but the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services just released a study on COVID in your larger cities, your cities that are predominantly Black cities. So for example, they looked at Chicago, and 50% of the COVID cases and nearly 70% of the COVID deaths were all tied into Black individuals. Although Blacks only represented 30% of the population, but they had the highest portion of individuals diagnosed with COVID or dying from COVID. Then they did a similar study, and they looked at St. Louis. And they looked at St. Louis, and then they also looked at Louisiana. And 70% of the deaths had due to COVID were among Blacks. So then when you start to look at mental health issues, then you create multiple generations who have to deal with a parent or grandparent, a close friend, who not only was diagnosed, but died of COVID. And then not being able to, specifically in the Black culture, where funerals are almost synonymous with family reunions, where a large people, they come together, they fellowship, they eat, they pray, they celebrate not only the death of the person, but they celebrate the life of that person. But during COVID, they weren't able to do that. They weren't able to say goodbye to Big Mama, or they weren't able to say goodbye to Papa. So that does something psychologically as well. So not only is it affecting them in terms of mental health, but then the psychosomatic symptoms tied into the headaches, the stomach aches, the back pains, and correlating that together. And then we look into the lack of appropriate, culturally competent therapists who look at death differently than if you're a Black therapist, you can identify with those feelings. But if you're a white therapist, you may not be able to identify why this person is so distraught over Big Mama's dying, but Big Mama was the pillar of the family as well as the community. So that affects Blacks and Hispanic at a greater rate when it comes to mental health issues and treating the mental health issues. And not only treating it, but making sure that the diagnosis is accurate. And when we start to look at African Americans, we get diagnosed with the more severe mental diagnosis. And typically it's the wrong diagnosis, it's misdiagnosis. And then when we come to diagnose it and having the wrong diagnosis, then it's the wrong medication and it's not treating. And then it turns into this ripple effect for a client.
Yeah, and I think, as you pointed out, I mean, the COVID-19 has definitely impacted health equities, in many cases exacerbated them in many different ways. And so this question goes to both of you as well, because you've definitely touched on this, Dr. Webb. But you know, how do you feel COVID-19 has impacted the health inequities that we've been discussing? I mean, has it only exacerbated? Has it highlighted new ones? Has it actually led to some innovations that have been helpful? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll go first on that. I look at it twofold. It has impacted, and I look at this in a positive light, because we're talking about healthcare disparities and we're talking about disparities. And now we're looking at the intersections. We're looking at being the LGBTQ community as well being diagnosed with COVID and the lack of treatment. We're looking at Blacks, Hispanics. We're looking at poverty, environmental conditions, and how because of COVID, we're all sitting home and everything is right there in front of us. So we're seeing these disparities. And now some of these issues are being addressed, just like me being on this Zoom meeting, being able to talk about this when maybe if COVID didn't exist, we wouldn't even have this conversation. As well as it's impacted, I have done probably 20 presentations on self-care and the importance of self-care and teaching people how to practice self-care, not just saying I'm gonna do a self-care plan. So this has also brought light to looking at the bigger picture. Before, if just think, if COVID did not come into place, we would still be going to the basketball games, taking our vacations, enjoying life. all of the social injustice issues that have taken place over the past year, it would have been, oh, they talked about it for a week and then that would have been the end of it. But because this is all we talk about, I'm seeing where more professionals are coming together. I see myself being invited to more events to speak about the disparity, not just in terms of COVID, but just across different cultures and ethnicities, and looking at how disparity even affects different populations of people that may have been marginalized, even with the Native Americans. What are we doing with the Native Americans on reservations now who have COVID, and how they're being treated, and what resources are we putting into place for that population as well? And then mental health issues as well, advocating for more therapy sessions for individuals, not capping it at 8. So now we have lobbyists who are lobbying for more access to medical treatment, mental health treatment for communities and for individuals of color.
No, absolutely. I think you make a really good point. We definitely are having more conversations, and I think that COVID has highlighted some of these key issues that need to be discussed and need to be addressed. Dr. Doss, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I think Dr. Webb kind of touched on all the things that I wanted to say about that particular question. One of the things that to kind of reiterate the fact that there's the conversation that is being highlighted. Of course, there's COVID, and also the things that happened with George Floyd that just has really brought to the forefront the inequities, and just kind of seeing, okay, hey, look, there's a lot more of a conversation about these health inequities and what have you, which it's unfortunate that it took this to really have people really talk about this, the inequities in our communities and whatnot. But to reiterate, I'm glad that it's being discussed, and hopefully there'll be more resources that are poured into the underserved communities and what have you, to address these issues and what have you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that really brings me to some of your work, Dr. Doss, on mobile health interoperability, bringing in really the intersection of technology with these health inequities. So, would love to just hear a little bit about your work with mobile health and how you see technology improving the dissemination of information, health information to underserved communities.
Right. Yeah. So there are various ways in which mobile health access and mobile health applications and whatnot can really improve the health system and overall, and also especially in the underserved communities and what have you. So one of the ways is I guess I kind of view health information there are multiple ways of interpreting that term. Like, so there's, getting information about a disease such as COVID or even prostate cancer or some of these other things. So one way, in terms of disseminating that information and getting it out there to let people know, to say, hey, look, here's where you can actually get your vaccine. This is where these are some locations where vaccines are available, or this is when it's going to be your turn to get a vaccine, that sort of thing. Having 24/7 access to, say, a mobile phone or what have you, or of course the internet, means that more people can kind of be brought onto the same page and whatnot, in terms of where to actually find this information and where to find these resources and whatnot. Another aspect, of course, one of the main things that our mobile devices are used for is, of course, social media and whatnot. And there are various campaigns such as, take your father to the doctor, to get a screening for prostate cancer, or take your mother to work, or take your mother to the doctor to get a breast cancer screening or whatnot. Of course, these sorts of diseases impact, greatly impact underserved community. Kind of reiterate what Dr. Webb said earlier, in terms of people not having access to the doctor. Whereas other populations that are getting their examinations on an annual basis, if you can't afford, the $100 or whatever it costs to get a physical each year, that means the treatment can go misdiagnosed and whatnot. So having those campaigns where people say, hey, look, I want to go ahead and take you to the doctor, or I'm going to go ahead and go with you, or, to address, any mistrust that there may be, those sorts of things can greatly help in terms of, getting people to the doctor and whatnot. Another way of looking at health information is information about the actual patient, the person who's seeking information or seeking medical attention and what have you. And one of the ways, and of course, we've all, not sure how many people who know someone who has COVID. It's pretty much ubiquitous that we at least know someone that has had COVID and whatnot. And I know someone that had it, and what they did was they actually got one of these portable pulse oximeter machines. These things, it's a personal device, it costs maybe $40, $50 or whatnot, and you put it on your finger, and it calculates how much oxygen the percentage of oxygen that your blood is taking in. And this person, they called the doctor, and the doctor said, hey, what is your pulse ox, your pulse ox reading saying? And as long as it was in a certain region, they were like, hey, look, you're fine, you can stay, you don't need to come in and whatnot. And having this mobile health information meant that the doctors were able to manage who actually had to come and pay a visit. And of course, we all know that the hospitals were really overwhelmed in many cases. Things are getting a little bit better now, but we had a time where it was just, and it's been a very long time, where there just wasn't a lot of access. And having these people, anybody who had symptoms, and having them come and go to the ER, that would really cause, that would just exacerbate the problem. So actually being able to capture this information in the home, and tell them, hey, look, you're fine for now. Let us know if anything changes. Just monitor yourself. Take your readings 3 times a day, and that's the treatment plan. That kind of reduce the burden and what have you. There are various other sensors that can be used, such as blood pressure monitors that are in the home, or glucose monitors and things of that nature, which of course also impact our underserved communities at a higher rate and what have you. And just letting the doctor be able to kind of say, hey, look, what is your readings? They can do that over the phone, and that'll really reduce the burden and what have you.
Yeah, no, so thank you. So, I mean, it sounds like in terms of the intersection of technology and health care and health information, there's almost sort of 2 strands of this. It's sort of the connectivity of the world. And, as Josh talked about with 5G, how more connected the world is becoming and how much more accessible that connectivity is becoming. And so health information is able to spread to a wider array of communities than it was able to before. But then on top of that, you can also think about technology in the form of, physical devices that can be capturing information in ways that, we used to have to travel somewhere to get that information. So there's just that expansion of personal devices. Another thing I was curious about thoughts on from you, Dr. Dawson, Dr. Webb, feel free to chime in here as well. Is the concept of racial bias within the healthcare system, and what role technology can play in trying to reduce bias that does exist in the healthcare system.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. I actually saw this episode on TV. There's a show called maybe it's not the greatest show to watch. It's called Evil, but it's basically a show where there's a person who's has a religious background, and there's a scientific person has a scientific background, and in there there's somebody who's supposedly raised from the dead and whatnot, and the scientific person was kind of like, what they did was they actually did a analysis like when whenever white people passed, they would perform CPR for like 45 minutes. But whenever African American people would pass, they would only perform CPR for like say 20 minutes, whatnot. And in this episode, the person came back to life after that time had passed, and they was able to prove, well, it was actually racial bias that actually identified that that was why she came back. It wasn't like a miracle, whatnot. And that's kind of thought about it. It's like, you know what? By utilizing the data that's available in the hospital, we can actually, there's things such as, there's something called machine learning where you actually capture data and whatnot, and it can be used to identify, okay, in what ways are underserved populations being, are they receiving the same medicines? Are they receiving the same amount of treatment? Are they being seen in the same amount of time? Are they being seen for the same amount of time? These sorts of things can be used. And I think that with this information, we'll be able to show, hey, look, it's not just something that is being, it's not just, anecdotal sorts of conversations. This is some real things that we can actually see and monitor here in the hospital and whatnot, or in the clinics and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Webb, anything to add?
I was just thinking, because when we start to talk about our marginalized population, I also think of the baby boomers. At one time, they were the largest population of individuals in this country. But I think about how technology has created a disconnect with them in the healthcare profession. If you think about, say, for example, a senior woman who's a widow, she's 80 years old, she still has some independence and she lives on her own. When she goes to make her doctor's appointment, she hears that message that says, they give her instructions to use her smartphone to make her appointment. However, she has a flip phone that was issued maybe by the government, and she doesn't have access to a smartphone. Then the other part of the recording says, or go online to the medical portal and pull up your information. Well, she doesn't have that either. And then the phone line hangs up. So what is this 80 or 90-year-old woman supposed to do? She misses her appointments and she's sitting at home. She has some medical conditions. She's out of her prescriptions. And she's been one of those groups now who has been disconnected with the medical profession. And we keep on going and we create this excellent technology for Generation X, Generation Z, and then the millennials. So I look at that intersection as well. And what is technology doing for that population? Because that is a really tough situation to be in. And then when we look at the mental health and we look at COVID and we look at the sandwich generation, I'm a part of the sandwich generation. My father passed away, so my mother is 75 years old, and I'm helping her out with technology, and she's just learning how to download and save a Word document, and she's getting frustrated with that. And then sometimes I have to drive all the way to her house, so she drives all the way to my house so I can show her how to go into her medical portal. Then the next population is the younger generation, who my kids are well advanced than I am with the technology. So those are also issues that we have to think about. And I would love for maybe one of our students to bridge that gap, be able to make that connection to help out and think of something that goes across generations. So I just mentioned 4: baby boomers, X, the Generation Z, and I'm missing millennials. So the millennials. So I think that would be something interesting that they may be able to tie into.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there are huge gaps between each generation. And we're definitely seeing that, come to the forefront with COVID, I think, especially as well. So, I know in the interest of time, I would love to just spend the last couple of minutes getting your thoughts on how to best sort of support students on campus who are thinking about submitting social impact projects to the Verizon Challenge. What are there other resources on campus that can help students in crafting strong projects, whether they're health-related resources, tech-related resources, or just general support in general?
And I sent an email earlier, and I think one of them, can you get that one to the students, the toolkit?
Yes, yes, I can.
And that health toolkit has the list of agencies, the type of services they provide. They will connect, if students connect with them, they'll also share their ideas. Most of the agencies are very client-centered and client-focused. I think an excellent resource for our students. Now, I'm only dealing with the health and the mental health, for them to look in the health center on campus and seeing that as a resource. Cultural, the multicultural center on campus, also the counseling center, health services. Those are some excellent resources. Look into academic affairs. They are excellent in terms of being able to connect you with individuals or help you shape ideas and places to go where they may be able to say, this is where we need some services, or this is what we're lacking in. And you all could be creative innovators to help make the connection with what's lacking, and this young, intelligent minds can help build and grow something that will be very beneficial, not only to our campus, but other campuses and other entities.
Yeah, and I'd like to also add there's a center known as a Coach Center, which is the center of for outreach and Alzheimer's, aging, and community health. That is a center that's devoted to getting the information, disseminating information about dealing with people who have Alzheimer's, and they do a lot of outreach. And I'd also recommend maybe talking to some of the professors, like in this College of Nursing. You know, they're dealing with medical, and you can kind of, you know, they've probably got a lot of ideas. Also, you know, some of the sociologists and psychologists, some of those professors, they have, you know, some ideas, some problems that really need tackling, and you can kind of just have a conversation, just kind of say, hey, look, you know, what sorts of things are you seeing? And of course, someone with a sociology background, of course, a lot of times they're studying things like the disparities between the various groups and what have you. So I'd say, you know, kind of talk with them and just maybe have a 25 or 30-minute conversation with them, and they'll be able to give you some ideas as well.
Yeah, no, thank you both. I think something important that you both touched on is connecting with resources on campus to try to understand, you know, what are the current problems and what gaps currently exist in solutions. You know, what areas could students develop projects and develop solutions in that could really address those gaps, and making sure that, you know, you're working with communities and community organizations that are working on these projects as well, so that you know, that you make sure that you're addressing the real needs that are there. So in the interest of time, thank you both for joining us and for your expertise and sharing your experiences. This conversation was illuminating, and I'm so excited to share it with even more students. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, well, that concludes the session, everyone. If you have any other questions, my email is in the chat, and I will also follow up via email, and feel free to reach out with any questions. And we look forward to seeing you at the Design Sprint, March 8th through 12th, for some virtual coaching and your application on April 1st. So thank you so much, everyone.